Welcome back. All right, so I'm starting to pre-record videos that are going to go live while I'm on vacation. So hopefully the vacation goes well, or else this is going to be awkward that I'm going to be chipper when I shouldn't be chipper. So this is an argument that's out there a lot. I have explained this on the channel before, but I am perfectly fine to explain this again because all the time I hear you can't cheer for Vancouver and Boston. It's not allowed. The weird thing is, it's only Vancouver fans that tell me this. I can't recall a Boston fan ever saying, "Well, we won't accept you into our fandom because you cheer for Vancouver." I've seen, "We feel sorry for you for cheering for Vancouver, but we welcome you to the club." And I've been told if I ever want to go to TD Garden, they want me there. I want to go to TD Garden and watch a game. I absolutely do. But I'm at Rogers watching Canucks games every year too, and that's a lot of fun. Now, the reality is Vancouver and Boston only play each other twice a year. And I never once heard anybody say you can't cheer for Boston and Vancouver until 2011. Now, 2011 was an interesting season because I'd been a fan of Boston's for over 20 years at that point. I've been a fan of Vancouver for 30 years at that point because my fandom of Vancouver predates my fandom of Boston. Not by that long, really. So Vancouver, it was, I mean, obviously just because I lived in the area. I've started doing videos on the Entertainment Guy talking about my life story. So by all means, if you want to peruse those videos, I honestly, I've been told I'm a good storyteller. So go ahead and check that out and see just how this sad, pathetic kid grew up to be the hockey guy where he's just in a room talking about hockey all day. So I also want to mention the first jersey I ever had was given to me. It was a friend of my dad's. It was a Boston jersey. It was really beat up. The bears on the shoulders, gone. But the glue that stuck them there still remained. So it wasn't great looking. So I'd always wear a jacket over the top. But when I started wearing it to school, I had people say, "Nice jersey. It's not bad. Nice jersey." Because the crest on the front looked fine. There weren't any stains on it. So as long as I kept my jacket on, which was fine in class, I got compliments. And I was like, you know what? I like this jersey a lot. And so by the time I hit my senior year in high school, I wore that Boston jersey a lot, and I had become a fan of the team. They had Andy Moog, my favorite goaltender. They had Cam Neely, my favorite player. Ray Bourque, my favorite defenseman. I didn't see any reason I couldn't have a team in the East. I already had the Minnesota North Stars and Vancouver in the West. So why not cheer for Boston as well? And of course, when Minnesota moved to Dallas, I remained a fan of the then Dallas Stars, right? So I didn't see any conflict then. I certainly never had anybody come up to me at high school and say, "You're a Bruins fan, but you're a Canucks fan. What's the deal?" And so while I understand the upset with the 2011 final, I was upset with the 2011 final too. So every year I had a counter. And I would say, okay, so you have got 12 wins until you get to the Stanley Cup final, right? 16 wins altogether, 12 wins to get the Stanley Cup final. So if both of these teams make the playoffs, there's 24 wins between them meeting each other. And so every year I would have a countdown. And sometimes it got a little bit low, but it never got that low. Well, in 2011, when Boston is against Tampa and Vancouver's against San Jose, and I felt really good about Vancouver's chances against San Jose, I did not feel as good about Boston's chances against Tampa. Tampa's power play scared the heck out of me. Thankfully, they didn't get any power plays in that Game 7, which no Tampa fans ever complained about. I'm kidding. But when Boston wins that Game 7, and Vancouver had already gone into the Stanley Cup final, I was so ecstatic. It was one of the most pure moments of joy I ever had as a hockey fan, jumping around my apartment that a team I cheered for was guaranteed to win the Stanley Cup, right? One of my two favorite teams was guaranteed to be the Stanley Cup champion. And I wouldn't have any stress in the final. I'd have none. This was going to be great. The stress in the final started Game 2. And so as things started getting uglier between the teams, and it ballooned from there. And of course we had, "Oh, I don't need to pump his tires. You should pump my tires." And all I could think as the final went along was they're both behaving like babies. I know that Vancouver fans get mad at Boston. Boston fans get mad at Vancouver. Being a fan of both teams, I was like, both teams are behaving like children. This sucks. I recorded Game 1 because I was planning on recording all 7 games. I erased that recording immediately after Game 2, and I did not record Game 2. I didn't record anything for the rest of that series. I was disgusted by both teams in that series. I was honestly kind of glad when it was over. And it did not negatively impact my fandom of either team. I was just ticked off that I finally got a final between two teams I cheered for, and it became the most heated, hated opposition ever. And I just thought it was so odd. I often see, and you see this almost every night, that team's really dirty. That team's really dirty. Both Boston and Vancouver at that time had players that could play that style of game. Both teams had that sandpaper in their lineup, and so it made for a pretty just ugly matchup. This was a final that I didn't really enjoy that much. I'm glad I didn't have a channel at the time because it would have come out. I would have said it. I don't enjoy this. This is not fun. All the games in Vancouver were low-scoring affairs. Had to be a shutout for Luongo or they were going to lose. And in Boston, they were just blowouts. They were just blowouts. Vancouver, games 3, 4, and 6. It was a mess. It was a disaster. But coming out of that final, I never considered dropping Boston as like the team I cheered for since 1987, right? They just won the Stanley Cup, but I'm going to stop cheering for them because they beat the other team I cheer for. That didn't even make sense to me on any level. I did not have the allowance to wear a Boston jersey out in public in my hometown for a while. I think it was almost a year before I started wearing my Boston jersey. And even when Yvonne and I started dating and we'd go out together, I would get comments when I wore Boston, and I still do. But I'm still willing to wear Boston when I go out because it's one of my favorite teams. I got their Centennial jacket last month. I was so excited to get myself a Centennial jacket. I was just, that jacket's beautiful. It's just the lining on in it is just amazing. So the first jersey that I bought was Vancouver. It was this one. This jersey is the first jersey I ever bought. I've had this jersey since 1990. It's seen better days. It's all beat up, like me, right? But I've kept it, and I've replaced it. Like I've got another jersey exactly like this, which is much nicer, and the logo's in really good shape that I got off eBay, used obviously. But that was the first jersey I got. And notice it's the white one. I've always liked the white skate better than the black skate. Everybody else is black skate. And I'm like, am I the only one that thought the white one looked sharper? But I like the contrast. Something my wife's figured out pretty quickly was I really like high contrast. So that's why some of the ugly jerseys I really liked. People are like, why? It's the high contrast that I usually like. The third jersey that I had in my collection, I bought, was the white home jersey for the Boston Bruins. And then I got the home and away for the Minnesota North Stars, which was after they ditched the N and they went to the Stars logo before they switched to the Dallas Stars. Before they moved to Dallas, they had that logo that became the Dallas logo. Just for the 1 year, and that's a whole topic I can get into another time. But my fandom of Vancouver has never been affected by Boston and vice versa. In 2011-2012 season, Vancouver kind of messed with their lineup to make themselves a little bit tougher to play against. And clearly it was to go after Boston. And I thought it was a mistake. Because Boston's in the other conference. You're not going to see Boston again in the Stanley Cup final if you get there, in all likelihood. So I didn't understand what Vancouver was doing necessarily. They beat Boston in the regular season, and then they lost in the first round of the playoffs. So it didn't feel like Vancouver was getting closer to a championship at all. It pains me that Vancouver still doesn't have a Stanley Cup. It also pains me that the only Stanley Cup I have seen Boston win is in a final where I was actually hoping that Vancouver would win. So the only time where a team I cheer for has won a Stanley Cup final where I'm cheering specifically for them over anybody else is 1999 when Dallas beats Buffalo, which of course doesn't have any controversy at all, right? So the idea that I can't cheer for both, to me, is just, I hear it, it goes in one ear, it goes out the other. Because I've cheered for them for over 30 years each. There's no reason I can't cheer for them. If these teams meet in the Stanley Cup final, you'll see me doing a happy dance. There will be a video on this channel me doing a happy dance. I will be absolutely the most obnoxious YouTuber, and I'm aware of who I share this platform with. That's quite the bar to set. But, and I know, people are going to be like, he's talking about Steve Dangle. No, I'm not. I'm talking about some really obnoxious... Steve Dangle's a nice guy. Steve's a nice guy. I've had a lot of conversations with him on Twitter, now X, of course. And any interactions I've had with Steve, he's been great. Honestly, I think he's a really nice guy, and I just want to say straight up, I've had nothing but respect for him. from when this channel started until now. So no, when I'm talking about obnoxious YouTubers, to me it's not Steve. I think the Leaf fan reactions videos, that's a character he's playing. It's not really Steve. It's just Steve dialed up, which at one point early in the channel, if you've been a channel viewer long enough, you would know this. I wanted to do videos where I argued with myself. I had the objective side of myself, which you people see all the time in videos, and then the fanboy, Canuck fanboy version, and that's when I found out Steve Dangle existed. People said, oh, that's very similar to what Steve Dangle's doing. You shouldn't do that. And so when I watched a Steve Dangle video where he was doing the Leaf fan reaction as a fan, I went, you can't do it. I will not copy another YouTuber. So, and I've stuck to that from then until now. But yeah, I've always had these two as my top two teams. Minnesota North Stars were the top team for a while there, but they ended up slipping to third because Boston, 1988 run to the Stanley Cup Final, 1990 run to the Stanley Cup Final, Vancouver, of course, in 94, Boston, 2011, 2013, 2019. They don't win in the Stanley Cup Final, but they go there often. So it's been fun for me to be a fan of Boston, and one of the reasons I picked Boston when I did, so first off, my dad, a huge Montreal fan. He was a huge Montreal fan. When I decided to root for Boston, I think it broke his brain on some level. But I get that. I totally get it. But do I have any regrets? No. And that's even though at the time Montreal was knocking Boston out in the playoffs every year, except for when Eddie Moog was the starting goaltender. Moog was able to beat Raw, which just made me so happy. But I've never found that there's any kind of conflict for me personally. So fans pick up on that, and fans, well, the funny thing is that I did see a comment on the Entertainment Guy with, well, I don't have a Boston thing up on my board, so, or up on my wall, so if you want to be seen as a Canuck fan, you shouldn't have that. There's a Canuck one right next. That logo it's an orca right there. The Hockey Guy one is Canucks, and there's a Brock Besser in between, and then the Boston one has my name on it. So that was kind of my way of saying Vancouver, Boston. Number one, Vancouver. Number two, Boston. When we moved into this house, I could have had Shannon first, the Hockey Guy second, since technically my name is Shannon. The channel's the Hockey Guy, but I thought, no, Vancouver has to go first because that's my favorite team. Boston is second. There are times where I will cheer for Boston against Vancouver, but only in one scenario. Vancouver is not in a playoff spot. I'm hoping they get a really good draft pick. Boston is in a playoff spot, so it's more beneficial for me as a fan to see Vancouver lose that game, get a better draft spot, and Boston win that game and get a better playoff spot. So to me, that's how I look at it. When Boston plays Dallas, I don't really care who wins. I just have fun watching the game. I don't get overly upset if Dallas wins. I don't get upset if Boston wins. It's just a fun game. And when Vancouver plays Dallas, kind of the same thing. I'm perfectly fine cheering either way. I don't have a problem with it. Again, if Vancouver's out of the playoffs or Dallas is out of the playoffs, makes it a lot easier. Because again, I want to see a team I cheer for get that better draft pick so they can be a better team next year. So it's never been a problem for me. I understand it's a problem for a lot of people. I understand. I get it. And I even understand why. But for me as a hockey fan, never been an issue. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I do expect a lot of you can't cheer for both because I've heard that since 2011. Again, before 2011, nobody ever said it. And since 2011, it's been everywhere. But again, it hasn't been Bruins fans telling me that. It's generally been Canuck fans. Because Bruin fans, they're cool with it. If I cheered for Montreal and Boston, I think there'd be more of a, now wait a minute. But Vancouver, again, I've talked about this before too, that I think what builds real hate for fans is that team that beats your team. So the fact that Vancouver didn't beat Boston means Boston fans, they didn't have that same hatred going forward because they won. So that bitterness isn't there. They're happy about it. They won. They tooled them in Game 7. So, And so it's a completely different attitude they have towards Vancouver than Vancouver has towards Boston. I'm not saying they like Vancouver or the Canucks, but they're more like, we'll forgive him for being a Canuck fan and welcome him into our numbers. Whereas Canuck fans are like, damn it, dude, just stop cheering for Boston already. Stop it. You can't cheer for both. They play each other twice a year in an 82-game schedule. They won't meet again unless they meet in the Stanley Cup Finals. But damn it, we're going to stand our ground on this. And anybody who's known me for a long time knows that the worst thing you can do to this guy here is to say, well, you can't do that. Really? Okay. So, I mean, if it's jumping off a bridge, I agree. If it's jumping out of a plane, I agree with that too. The daredevil stuff, not so much. But there are times where somebody will say, well, you can't do that. And I go, yeah, I can. And definitely as this channel's grown, there have been times where people have said, well, no, you can't. You can't do that kind of a video because people won't watch it. And then I've been like, I have. And then people did. So there you go. But thank you guys so much for all your support as always. As I said, I hope I'm enjoying my trip at this point, or else my chipperness is going to be lying about how I'm actually feeling at this moment. But hey, thank you guys so much for all your support. It's great to see the growth of the channel. I understand too that the negativity towards me being a fan of both teams, I don't think it's a majority of Canuck fans that feel that way. I don't. I think it's a very vocal minority of the fan base. And there's nothing I can say to appease that fan base. One thing I learned early on YouTube, and this is something I would tell people considering starting a YouTube channel, you will never please everybody. In fact, when you look at a comment section, you're likely going to feel like you're not pleasing anybody, because people are far more likely to leave a negative comment than a positive one. I learned that in tech support. I've learned that at retail. I have seen it in various areas. People are far more likely to leave something negative than something positive. Generally, if people like things, they're just going to like it. They may not leave a comment, but thank you for people that do. It's greatly appreciated. And if you haven't already hit like and subscribe, go ahead, give it a shot. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.